In this video, we're going to show you how to install the valve cover on your Jeep Wrangler located on the top side of your engine. On the top side of your throttle body, there is the intake tube with a clamp. You can use a flathead screwdriver, or you can use a socket if you need to, but a flathead screwdriver will work just fine. You want to go ahead and loosen that hose clamp. On the top side of your air box, you have the air tube that crosses over the top of the engine. There is a hose clamp right here that secures the two together. Use your flathead screwdriver, loosen that hose clamp. On the top side of your engine right here, you have the air intake tube and the PCV tube here. You want to go ahead and separate the two here. Once you have that disconnected, remove the air intake tube from the top side of the engine, set it aside. With the intake tube off, go ahead and grab a towel or a rag, and you want to go ahead and protect that throttle body. You don't want anything to fall down inside that. Now we have our valve cover running through the very top center of the engine right here. And what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and disconnect any of the components that are blocking us from getting this off of the engine. You're going to pop that up. You're going to spin this off to the side a little bit. Now on the top here, we have a protective covering here for a harness that actually just slides over the studs for the cylinder head. I want to go ahead and work this up and off. Ours is already broken. So you want to go ahead and remove this off of the valve cover. We have our throttle linkage right here. It's not necessary for you to have to separate this here, but it does help. If you want to go ahead and do that, right on the back side here are two little clips. You can pinch those together. Sometimes it's best to use a pocket screwdriver or a pair of pliers to go ahead and do this job. I'm going to choose the pocket screwdriver. You're going to press in on these little tabs. Boom and boom, that's going to be loose. Now if you follow that cable right to the throttle body right here, you can normally go ahead and just pop this off. It's a ball and socket design. Just pop that off, slide this out, and you can swing that cable off and just tuck that off to allow you room to get in here and work. Let's go off to that passenger side there, and you're going to see the heater hoses, which are these two right here. I'm going to pull these hoses out of the retainer right here. And we can always flex those out of the way. Here's a retainer that holds the hoses, so we're just going to pluck that off and set that aside for now. Around the perimeter of the valve cover, there's going to be a series of bolts all the way around. We want to go ahead and look at those there. We want to go ahead and set that up to come off. On the back side here, we have another vacuum port. We want to try and work that off there. We might have to use a pair of hose pliers to get that to slide off. Slide that off and pivot that off to the side. Around the perimeter is going to be a series of 8mm bolts. So we're just going to pull this harness up, and let's go ahead and start to loosen these. Be careful not to drop the bolts and the washers here. I'm going to switch off to the other side and start removing those. I switched over to a regular 1/4" ratchet with extension and socket for clearance issues on the back side here. I'm going to head back over to the driver's side and remove the rest of those over there. On the back side of the valve cover, there is one more bolt back there, so you're just going to have to maneuver the wire harness on the back side of the engine. Get your socket down in there and get that one out. It's a little bit more complicated to get to. Once that's loose, I just pop the extension and the socket off of the ratchet, and you can spin that by hand. There's the back bolt. We have our last bolt right here. This is the stud for the heater hose bracket. This is an 11 millimeter. Go ahead and spin that out. Now at this point here, we want to just make sure that we have clearance to go ahead and lift that valve cover up and off. Give it a little wiggle. And it is definitely loose. So here we go. Grab that valve cover. Make sure that wire harness is out of the way in the back side. We'll pop off this connector right here. It's our temp sensor. Should allow us a little more lifting room here. Lift up the back of the valve cover. I'm just going to manipulate this around the harness. Slide that up and out. Now that you have the valve cover off, we can go ahead and reach down and grab the valve cover gasket. Go ahead and work that up and off. Go ahead and dispose of that. Our next step is to go ahead and clean the top surface of the cylinder head here where the gasket and the valve cover are going to reseat back on. So just going to use some spray solvent on a towel or a rag. And you want to go around the perimeter here. You want to make sure that this is clean and dry. You don't want to have any oil on there. At the same time, you want to be careful when doing this here. If there is any rust or debris, you don't want to push it into the engine. So be very, very careful. Take your time doing this job here. You're going to clean both sides and all around. And just continue this process until you're done cleaning the head. Now here we have our new valve cover gasket, and if you notice, there is a hole punched out here and a hole on the front side. These are going to line up with studs for the cylinder heads on both sides, and it should help you line everything up. So you want to make sure that this is also shaped to fit the cylinder head. Make sure that these edges match up. You don't want to flip it and have it put on this way here. Things may not line up and you're going to have an issue. So you definitely want to go ahead and make sure that that is installed properly. Go ahead and lower the gasket down into place. Push that down, make sure it's down and everything is lined up as it should be. Your next step, clean the surface on the bottom side of your valve cover, whether it is a plastic one or an aluminum one like we have here. You're going to use some spray solvent on a towel or a rag, and you want to make sure that the mating surface is clean of any oils, any debris. You want to make sure this is as clean as possible. Continue to do this until you're satisfied with it being clean. Let's go ahead and install your valve cover. I'm going to go ahead and line this up and bring that around the back side. Now there is a wire harness in the back. You're going to have to manipulate that so that drops down inside there. Now at this point, I want to just simply go ahead and start working the harness and the hoses out of the way for this front portion here. Line that up, and we want to drop that down in a position. Make sure everything else is out of the way, and we'll just work that down. Okay. Make sure that cover's lined up. Check on this side here. And we'll check the passenger side, make sure there's nothing underneath the valve cover. Make sure that it is fully seated as it should be. And our valve cover is rocking a little bit, so you want to make sure if yours is rocking, it's not fully seated. So you need to carefully take the time to figure out why that is doing that. Our valve cover is hitting one of the cylinder head studs in the back, so we'll just need to adjust the valve cover and get that seated properly. On the back driver's side here, the valve cover is hitting one of these cylinder head studs. We have it underneath the washer component there, and our valve cover is flat and not rocking anywhere. So at this point here, it is safe to go ahead and start getting our bolts put in. Now, if your vehicle has the factory plastic valve cover, you're going to have these rubber grommets here that actually go into the valve cover where the bolts are going to go. And they simply press in to the ports, and you got a whole bunch of them here to fit into each area here. Our particular vehicle has the aluminum valve cover on it, does not require these here, but you would install the rubber grommets and still continue to put your bolts in, get them all started by hand. Same process we would use with the aluminum valve cover. Once you have all of your bolts in and they're started by hand, make sure you start them by hand. You don't want to cross thread these. Go ahead and zip them all down by hand with your socket and extension. Just get those bottomed out. Once these are all in, we'll come back and torque them down. Now on the top here, finally, we have our valve cover installed. We want to go ahead and torque down the bolts securing the cover. In order to do this properly, they have to be done starting from a center bolt. We want to cross over, and then we want to come back over, come forward, back over, and we're going to continue to do this all the way until we get to the outside bolts and finalize our torquing there. Now these need to be torqued to 85 inch-pounds or 7.8 foot-pounds. And we're going to continue this process throughout until our valve cover is torqued completely down. Install the vacuum tube here, bring that over, going to slide that onto our vent port. We have our throttle cable here, going to pop that into the bracket here. I'm going to feed this through, snap that into place, and we're going to snap that onto our throttle body linkage. Go ahead and snap that on the top here. Just going to bend this over. And we have our connector right here for our temp sensor. Snap that in. You can feel and hear that snap into position. We're going to take our air intake tube, get this ready to install. Remove the towel or rag from the throttle body and install the air tube here. Press it into the throttle body as well as the air box on the other side. Install the vacuum port here. Let's tighten down the two clamps on the intake tube. Use your flathead screwdriver. You want to go ahead and just tighten these down. You want to make sure that the clamp is snug. All right, we're tight there. Go ahead and repeat that same process for the air box side. Make sure that is pulled on all the way. That's tight. Now don't forget the clamping unit here for the heater hoses. This simply presses down onto the stud on the valve cover. And just bring those hoses back over. And we're going to press those into the bracket. On the side of the valve cover here, you want to go ahead and reinstall your fuel injector harness wires. The little plastic caps here push down on top of these cylinder head studs. Once you've done that, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.